Okay, fantastic. So stoked you guys are here for our first ever, the initial proficiency class. So what we're going to be covering over the next few weeks is the RLA, the RPA. We're going to cover disclosures. And then today, what we're going to go over is pulling comparables. Real quick here. Okay, fantastic. So a lot of you have already pulled comps in the past, and I know that you've been successful in getting your clients into contract because I see your contracts flowing in. So fantastic. You guys already have a great baseline. What my purpose is today is I want to take that baseline and elevate it. So the art of pulling a CMA, it is truly an art. And that's why appraisers get paid, right? There are professionals out there that this is their gig. This is what they do all the time. Are you going to be 100% proficient in it? No. But my goal is to get you as close to that as absolutely possible. So it's going to take us some time to learn. Let's buckle in. We're going to go over the basics today. And then in the following weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to do deep dives into how to pull this on a cloud CMA, how to pull this on RPR, how to pull it on the MLS. There's so many different avenues of where we can pull comps, but today we're going to just do baseline basic how we got in here. Okay, beautiful. Look at you guys. This is great. So what is a CMA? What does this look like? A CMA is a comparable market analysis. Some folks call it comps, but when we're discussing this with our clients, we at first want to use the long form comparable market analysis. A lot of the buyers that we're working with today are first-time buyers, right? And so when we tell them, oh, the seller sends you the TDS and then there's the SPQ, and then I'm going to send it to you via disclosures IO, and I'm going to send you the CMA. Whoa. Like, can you imagine being a first-time buyer, not having any idea what this verbiage is, and then the realtor's throwing all these like acronyms at you? So at first, be cognizant of that and use the verbiage, comparable market analysis. Once they get the hang of it, then you can start using CMA. But that's just a quick tip that I wanted to make sure you guys are all aware of. Let's go through what this is. So it's essentially a tool that we use to estimate. All right, estimate. It's not a pinpoint on a price. It is an estimate of value of a specific property by evaluating similar ones that have recently sold in the same area. And then these truly are used to determine an offer price or a listing price. Now, let me see here. Oh, Fairfield office, you guys got in. Okay, beautiful. Love that. Okay, so what we're providing to clients is truly a bracketed approach. We don't typically like to tell a client, oh, this home is listed at 700,000. My CMA says that you should write an offer at 720. Here's why. We don't like to give that pinpoint approach, because then if it goes for 723, guess whose fault it is when they didn't get the offer? Right? That's going to be on us. Yeah. That's why we like to give them a bracket. Hey, you know what? It looks like it's comping out at 720. What my suggestion would be is to look at, I'm going to send you some links through Real Scout. Let's look at the last few properties that have sold right at 700, 710, 720. And then there's even one that may have sold at 730. That was like super baller, had an ADU in the back, was totally done up, new electrical, Tesla chargers. Those are the outliers, right? So typically what I do is I like to give about a $10,000 wiggle room. If I think this property is going to sell at 700, I'm going to say, you know what, this could be anywhere between 695 to 705, depending on the market. depending on how many offers there are, and truly it's going to come down to the comparables. Now, I would love to hear, let's see here. Jewel, let's hear from Jewel. Jewel, have you ran across a situation where you've pulled comps that you got it like spot on, right on the money?
Yeah, I've had that where like I'm super close, but I've had some where I remember this sale because I end up giving a credit and I talked the agent into giving a credit to so the seller could get what they were looking for, but also being fair to my buyer. And it was out there in Stockton, and I knew looking at the comps it would not appraise, but I offered, we offered, you know, kind of close to what they wanted, but then it appraised like 10,000 below, and was in the, you know, right after the shelter in place.
Oh, I see. Yeah, things got a little, the market got a little weird then, didn't it?
Right. Yeah. And there are other times where I was like right on it. I was like, oh yeah, that's a great guess. I mean, just looking, sometimes it's kind of hard when they're not cookie cutter. Just like the guessing is like pretty good. And sometimes like I've had clients over in Antioch, and I've had clients who have money, but then they're like, I'm not paying that much. And it sells like over $200,000 what it was listed at.
Right.
So
yeah. And I thank you for sharing that, Jewel. I appreciate it. And something that will give our clients confidence in us is, and this took me a long time to learn, you guys, instead of like, we have to be very cognizant of the verbiage that we use when it comes to these dollar amounts, right? We want to make sure that we're using data-driven approaches, right? This is not my opinion of value. This is what the data is showing us. We don't want to say, well, my best guess is that it's going to land at around 750. Instead, what we can say is based on the data and the comparables in this area, it looks like it's going to be around 695 upwards to 705. It could even go past that number because of this gorgeous updated kitchen. Now, let's go into the basics of this. So ideally, let me share screen here. There we go. Can you guys see my screen? Cool. Thank you. Thank you. So the basics of comparable sales. So I got this actually from JVM, and something like Jewel mentioned was, you know, the comps came in, but the appraisal came in $10,000 below the asking or the pending price, right? What that happens sometimes is we're able to do what's called an appraisal rebuttal. Here is where you can see that. And a rebuttal essentially is going to be, you can come back to the lender and say, here are my 3 comparables that I use to justify this price. Can we have the appraisal manager take another look at this so that we can get closer to the pending price? Because what happens is, and you guys are all aware of this, but I'll just reinstate it to you. What happens is if our buyer comes in, let's say at 700, but the appraisal's at 690, Zachary, what happens then if that appraisal gap, if we have an appraisal gap of 10,000?
So say that again. So you're saying essentially the appraisal is 10,000 under?
Yes, that's correct.
So essentially, if it's 10,000 under, you would have that appraisal insurance, I guess you could say.
Oh, you mean
where
the
you would go
contingency?
the contingency, yes. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's pretty on the spot. Yeah, you're correct, Zachary. Sometimes buyers, that's perfect. Thank you. Sometimes buyers do have that appraisal contingency where they're able to back out of contract or negotiate with the seller if there is a delta, a shortfall, or a difference between the pending price and the appraisal price. Typically what's going to happen is the appraisal is going to come back, it's at value, everyone says hooray, we move forward. Sometimes what can happen is what we're discussing here, it is a shortfall of a few $1,000s, And then what we can do is we can either negotiate with the seller, or the buyer has to bring in a little bit of extra money to make up that difference. And then the seller can bring down their price. Or if your buyer has an appraisal contingency, they can make the decision to leave, to exit contract, right? Just like Zachary mentioned. Yep. Good deal, you guys. So I wanted to make sure to point out those, that rebuttal information. All righty. By a show of hands, has anyone ever done an appraisal rebuttal? No. Okay. Okay, good, good, good. From experience, I actually had to do one on my own home. The appraiser valued our home way, oh, Beverly has, okay, great, great. Elias has as well. Thank you for that participation, you guys. What happened is my home got undervalued because they didn't see the ADU in the back. Well, once we brought that to the appraisal manager's attention, it actually got and ended up going much higher than what we put in our offer at. So sometimes you have to go through these rebuttals. And what ended up happening is I had to ask for an extension of my appraisal contingency, because you see, my appraisal contingency was due Monday. I didn't get that report back until Monday morning. So then I had to rebuttal it, and it took us out another 5 days. I had to ask for a 5-day extension. That's going to happen sometimes. And as long as the listing agent knows that you're actively working with the appraisal manager to make things happen, then you should be in the clear. Clear communication is going to take you guys a long way. Okay, beautiful. So that's that little piece about rebuttals. Now let's pop into this here. So again, I'm going to share screen. Alrighty, the appraisal items. These are some of the most critical items that an appraiser is going to look at. We'll list them out first. It's size of the home, so square footage, the distance within the comparables, if it's in the same city or town, when it closed, the lot size, any adverse influence. We're going to talk about bracketing comps specifically for condos, view, and then closed date. Fairfield, your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Do you have to pay again for them to come back, for the appraiser to come back out, or no?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so typically with an appraisal rebuttal, you do not, because it's typically done on a desktop. However, when an appraiser, this is such a great question. I'm glad you asked. When an appraiser has to come out to a property, let's say that the carbon monoxide detectors were missing in the home, right? The appraiser is going to have to come back out to the property to make sure those are put back in, that they are installed properly before the close of escrow. So then, yes, then the buyer does have to pay for the appraiser to come back out in that instance. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And then
Okay.
one more question.
Uh-huh.
Can they deny the rebuttal or no?
That is an excellent question. Yeah. Can they deny the rebuttal? As long as you bring up a rebuttal, they're not going to deny it. You can rebuttal. They may still come to their same conclusion, but you can make rebuttals, but the bank may still say, the appraiser may still say, hard no, this is a $700,000 property. So your rebuttal could go either way. It could increase in price or it could stay the same. I have not heard of a rebuttal that goes below that initial appraisal. Typically they come at or above where the initial appraisal was at. Good. Cool, Fairfield, if that answered your question, if you could lower your hand. Thank you, I appreciate it. All righty. And yeah, you guys feel free to raise your hands. Any questions that you have along the way, go ahead and raise your hands. If I'm screen sharing, just unmute yourselves. Ricky White, you have a question. Oh, you'll need to unmute yourself, my dear. There we go.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm about to show a house at 130, and I have a buyer that's spending half cash, half conventional loan. But however, I talked to the seller, they don't think that the house will appraise. Do you think like a conventional loan, would they like waive the appraisal contingency if I ask them to, or is that something that like every bank kind of send their appraisal out and get it appraised?
Okay, so the question, let me make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So will the bank always come out and do their own appraisal? Is that the underlying question?
Yeah, pretty much.
Great question, Ricky. Even in cash sales, even if it's 100% cash, some banks will do a broker opinion of value. So that, so as an example, I had an all cash buyer, but their money was coming from essentially like a trust fund. And so then the bank sent out their broker, and it wasn't an appraiser. It was a local agent who is a broker. They went out, they did their CMA. They came back to the bank, said, cool, it's at value. That was that. So no matter sometimes if it's cash, there'll still be an appraisal, sometimes not. It depends on what the form of financing is. And then even if it's a 90% cash down, 10% financing, the bank's typically going to still continue to do an appraisal. Now, I want to mention one more thing to answer your question here, Ricky. It is not our decision if our buyer removes the appraisal contingency. It is 100% up to the buyer if they are going to be removing their appraisal contingency. Our job is to explain to them, this is what happens if you remove your appraisal contingency and the appraisal falls short. This is what happens if it comes in at value. So that they're given all the information. We share the comps with them, and then the buyer makes their decision. It is never up to us. We never advise clients, hey, remove all contingencies. You're in the clear. Even in a hot seller's market, you guys, that shouldn't be the initial advice. You always want to speak with the lender. Hey, Mrs. Lender, what is the debt to income here? Do they have wiggle room in case there's an appraisal difference of $10,000? Are they able to make up that difference? You'll have all that information in hand before you write the contract so that you're well aware of your client's financial situation. Is that clear, Ricky?
Yeah, I need to contact the lender. I asked her a few questions.
Yep, that's right. Great question. Awesome. And if that answered your question, you can go ahead and mute yourself and lower your hand. Awesome. Who else had a question? I think that was it for now, right? Okay, perfect. Well,
Yeah, I do.
yeah, Danielle.
What if the appraiser does not perform by the said appraisal date that they promised?
Great question. This happened a lot to us during
It happened to me.
the peak. Yeah, Danielle. So what ended up happening in your situation?
Well, he didn't do it on time. It was probably 4 days late, but I was just so communicative with the listing agent because I already knew. I just knew it wasn't going to be in by that day, just talking with the lender.
Sure.
And the lender didn't seem like it was a big deal. But if the listing agent, could have held me to it, or I'm just not sure what happens. Like, what if the listing agent's like, no, you said day 10 I don't know how that works. What happens?
Yeah. So essentially when we write a contract, it's up to us to make sure that we've asked the lender in an email.
Oh, I got it. I got it in
Yes,
writing.
I'm sure you did, Danielle, because we've talked about this before, and I want to make sure that you're all very clear on this. When you ask for timelines from a lender, you are to ask for those timelines in an email. Get that shit in writing, because if it comes back and the lender says, oh, I didn't tell you 10 days. We don't do appraisals until 21 days. Well, wait a minute. Per our email, right? You get that shit in writing for sure. Okay, if that happens to you, if the appraiser doesn't come out, so let's say the appraisal contingency is due on Monday. If I have not heard from that appraiser by Wednesday, I'm calling my lender. Hey, Sue, appraiser still hasn't called. I want to make sure, has the listing agent heard from the lender? Has the appraisal been scheduled? Because we're on a timeline here, right? If Sue, the lender, responds back and is like, oh no, they're good, they're gonna come out there on Saturday, in an email, hey, Sue, thanks so much for answering my question. Per our conversation, the appraiser will be out to the property on Saturday at 5 p.m. What is the timeline that we can expect the appraisal back? That's what it comes down to. When is my buyer going to get that appraisal in hand? That's what matters. So ask as many questions as you can up front of the lender. Be communicative with the listing agent like Danielle was. Let them know, hey, this is what's going on. This is where the appraisal is at. Be communicative and get that stuff in writing. You can always ask for extensions. If the appraiser is not there by Monday, when your stuff was due on Monday, ask for a 5 to 7 day extension. And you know, as much as listing agents don't like extensions, do you want to keep your client in contract, right? So just be communicative. Okay, great questions, you guys. Let's rock through the rest of these real quick, and then we'll have a short, as long as you guys need, of a Q&A. Alrighty, beautiful. So size, ideally the comps are going to be 20% of the subject property size. So this means if your property is 1,000 square foot property, 20% of 1,000 square feet is 200 feet. So 1,000 square feet plus 200 feet is 1,200 feet. Your comps should go no higher than 1,200 feet. On the back side, 1,000 square feet, 200 feet, 800 square feet. So your bracket can be anywhere between 800 square feet and 1,200 square feet. Is that clear? Give me some reactions here. Cool. Alrighty, distance. Ideally, it's going to be within a mile of the subject property. However, it should not be over any major barriers like a freeway, a river, or railroad tracks. Think about, let's use the Fruitvale neighborhood as an example, right? Once you pass International Boulevard, once you pass the 880, that's a different comp range, right? And so you want to be very cognizant of where that mile extends to. And oftentimes in your search, you're going to, instead of a radius of 1 mile, you're going to have to draw polygons that are not exactly a circle. It's just going to be, you know, a polygon shape to illustrate where the comps are at. So again, within 1 mile, if you can find a few that are even closer than a mile, perfect. You'll want to have a minimum of 3 comps. 3 comps is what you want your minimum to be. Alrighty, same town and city, of course, don't pull an Oakland property to a Concord property. Totally different areas, right? So just be very cognizant of that. Even if it's San Leandro to Hayward, if it's 1 block, it's not the same city, right? All right, closed. So this is going to be the strongest indicator. You want to make sure that your comps are within the last 90 days. Appraisers can go up to a year. However, we usually like to stay within 90 days. If I can't find comps within 90 days, if I can't find 3 solid good comps to show opinion of value, I'll go out 6 months. As a last resort, I'll go out a year. Alrighty, and then it's important that you know this. Pending and listings are used to show the current market, but they are not considered a final opinion of value. So although you can put in a pending to show, look, this is where the market's at right now, it does not give a final opinion of value. Let's say 123 Main Street is pending and set to close on April 1st. Our buyer's listing at 125 Main Street we're in contract and we're not due to close until April 30th. Well, if this one's going to close in time for the appraisal to come out, I'm going to call that listing agent. Hey, listing agent, I just wrote an offer up on 125 Main Street. Can you tell me, has 123 Main Street, have they already done their appraisal? So you can get information from the pending listing agents in your area. They're not always going to answer. That's okay. Lot size. So the appraiser is going to consider the lot size and the lot utility. If it's on a slope, so this happens often in the La Morinda area. If it's on a hillside on a slope versus a pancake flat lot, that makes a difference to the appraiser. So make sure that you're cognizant. You should, even in the beginning, you should be driving around to these different neighborhoods where your listings are at, where your buyers are getting into contract at, and check out the different comps in these areas. Let's see. Adverse influences. So if it's on a busy street, if it abuts to a school, a freeway, an industrial area, a cemetery, they are likely going to include that and in their opinion of value, and they're going to try to find something similar with that influence as well. Bracketing comps. So comps need to be bracketed to the appraised value. So what this appraiser is going to look for is, if let's say we wrote the offer at 700, the appraiser is going to look for something at 750 and at 650 or somewhere in that area. They want to bracket to see the different, something that's super updated, something that is still in the 1800s. Right? So they'll use different brackets. And then they also use size as well to show bracket of the home. Let's see. So condo comps, typically they're going to include comps inside and outside of the complex. If a complex has had a ton of sales in the last 90 days, then I would definitely include those sales rather than going out to other condos. Condo and townhome comps are a little bit of a different beast. You want to just be really cognizant of, have they had sales in the last 90 days, 6 months, a year in that complex? If there's a neighboring complex right beside it, but your complex has not had any sales in the last year, then that's when you'll want to look at the neighboring complexes to see what their sales have been in the past year. Zachary, can I do these last two and then come back to you? Right on. Thank you. Okay, so view is one of the last ones. So of course, if this is a property that is right on the sunset and it's got a gorgeous view of the Pacific Ocean versus a home that's a third of a mile in and has no view, of course, the appraiser is going to take this into account. However, they don't use it to support the value if it has no view. So if it's a neighborhood where there's no views, it's not going to matter. Typically, that's where we're at. But they typically don't use view comps to support if there's a property with no views. So this is another good example why the appraisers don't use the price per square foot analysis. We typically don't do that. Price per square foot, even, you know, I've had a lot of sellers that say, well, price per square foot, my city is this. Yes. However, a newly 2020 remodeled home versus your 1960s home that you've done no updates to, the price per square foot does not matter. Right? Alrighty, close date is our last one. Comparable sales must have closed prior to the inspection date of the appraisal. They cannot use comps that closed after the inspection date. You see how they keep saying inspection, right? They've said this inspection. The appraiser, here we go again, sales prior to appraisal inspections or rebuttals. They they use the term inspections this is how they do their comps. They're called inspections, appraisals, inspections. It goes hand in hand, but when the appraiser is out there, they're doing their appraisal inspection. This is really important for you to know, especially when it comes to FHA appraisals, right? Because those appraisers the glasses, the lens they put on is much more of an inspector lens. Now, I do want to share one, since I mentioned that, and then I'm going to come right to Zachary. I do want to share with you guys something that we're going to be covering next time. And that is when it pertains to FHA versus conventional. I'm going to pop this in for you guys in Fast Class. It was known as Mighty Network in the past. I'll pop both of these forms in for you guys in Fast Class. That way you guys can refer to them when you're pulling comps. All righty. Zachary, let's go to your question.
Oh yeah, so my question was essentially, I was running comps on condos and stuff like that. And like you said, it is a little bit tricky because depending on the time that the condo sold and stuff like that, they're very specific.
Mhm.
What is an appropriate time frame, I guess you could say, to go back to utilize and reference those comps?
Yeah, great question, ma'am. So typically we like to stay within 90 days.
Okay.
If I can find 3 stellar, even if I can find 3 to 5 stellar comps within 90 days, boom, there's my comps. Sometimes there's 1. If there's only 1 or none, I'll push that out to 6 months. If I only find 2, I'm gonna push it out to a full year, because appraisers, I forgot to mention to you guys this. I took the appraisal class at DVC, and the appraiser that taught that class was a freaking smart guy. His name was Robert. Such a smart guy. He specifically told me, look, we can go a year out, but ideally, Zachary, we're gonna do 90 days. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question. That was essentially my situation. There was only 1 comp available, so had to keep pushing back to about 6 months. So just wanted to make sure.
Right on. And when you went 6 months back, were you able to find a bit more?
Yeah, it was actually like the condo, like maybe 2 units down or whatever it was. So that helped a lot.
Sick. Okay, perfect, perfect. Carlos also mentioned in here, condos also have HOAs. Yeah, so HOA amenities, the price of the HOA, these are things to be cognizant of. Arlene, yes, I'm going to get you guys a copy of this in Fast Class. I'll make sure to send a notification out when I post those for you guys. It'll be in there this afternoon. I'll make sure to get that to you. Here's how I do a comp. So I'll run my comps. Cool, we get into contract. One of the most common questions I get asked next is, can I meet the appraiser at the property? What do we think? Let me show like some yeses, some nos. What do we think? I'm seeing some nos. I'm seeing some nos. I'm seeing a couple heads yes. Okay, so here's the thing, just like a lot of things in real estate, it depends. It depends, yeah. So I always try to meet the appraiser at the property. Here's what I do is, if I'm the point of contact for the appraisal, so if I've told my buyer's lender, hey, when it comes time for the appraisal, in an email, when it comes time for the appraisal, I would like to be the point of contact. Cool. So then the appraiser calls me. Then I'm going to tell the listing agent, hey, Mr. Listing Agent, we've got appraisal for 123 Main Street on Monday at 5 p.m. I will personally be there to let the appraiser in. I'm going to bring my comps. If you'd like to come, that'd be great as well. But I always ask the appraiser, may I please come to the property so that I can illustrate to you how we justified this price. Honestly, most of the time they're cool with it. 10% of the time I get hung up on and they're like, absolutely not, because they can't have us influencing their appraisal. Fairfield office, your hands up. Go ahead.
Sorry, still trying to learn this.
You're good.
Okay, so for example, there's this area in Vallejo, and I didn't have to write an offer on it, so I didn't really look into it, but how it's a flip home surrounded by a lot of apartments and surrounded by a lot of older homes. So there's not really many good comps compared to what you would think it would appraise for. How would an appraiser look at something that has mainly, it was probably like 3 blocks of just pure apartments? How does one look into stuff like that?
So Zyra, let me ask you this. How far out was your search? Like distance?
The search was, I believe I started searching at 1 mile and then searched 2 miles. And then it was like, why is there nothing around that same price? It was going to, if they went based on comparables, it was probably going to appraise like 150 under what it was listed at.
I see. Okay, got it. That's good to know.
A lot
Okay,
of older homes.
Older homes. I understand totally. We see that in Concord a lot as well. Yeah, great question. So first thing that I want to point out is, make sure that you guys are sticking under a mile. Anything over a mile, the appraiser is probably going to crumple your MLS sheet and toss it, because it's not a true comp, right? So here's my advice to you. If the appraiser says, yeah, come on out, I don't care. If there's no lockbox, you can let me in. Cool, let me into the property. When the appraiser tells me it's okay for me to come out to the property, what I do is I take my 3 comps, got my comps, okay? What I do is I go on the MLS and I drill into my 3 comps. Okay, comp number 1, it is an old ass house with old wiring. It needs to be it's a cosmetic overhaul. I'm going to jot down those notes on my MLS sheet, which I'm going to hand to the appraiser. Comp number 2, completely renovated home, has solar, has a pool, newly constructed driveway. Boom, there's comp number 2. The appraiser may not take the time to do that. So it's important that we, as representing our clients, that we are taking the time to show and illustrate where our opinion of value, where our justification of value came in at. So Zyra, for your example, try to meet the appraiser out there for sure. If they say no and they don't want your comps, that's that, you guys. You can't try and sell them on having you come out to the property, because then you may get cited as trying to influence an appraiser's mind, which is a no-no. But if they're going to allow you to come out, do the research, write it down, let them know, especially if the seller has done a whole remod and they've got a list of shit that they did to that house to make it beautiful. Snag that list at the open house. If you know your clients are going to make an offer, hey, listing agent, can I get a copy of that? Can I grab a copy for when we get into contract together? And then that way you can staple that to your MLS sheet and boom, there you go. You're ready to go. You've got your comps ready. Does that help, Zyra?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, rad.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question for sure. Mohsen, let's hear your question.
So I just had a quick question. So what happens? Most appraisers feel like they do a good job already. And so if you're going to rebuttal the appraiser, how often does that value actually change in reality? And the second part of my question is, are there times where you have to actually pay for a second appraiser because you felt like the value came in low?
Yeah, these are excellent questions. I'm so glad you guys are asking these like next level questions. How often does this happen? It depends. In our strong market that we were just in, most appraisers were coming in at value. sometimes they would do drive-by, right? However, in a shifting market, which many of us, not all of us, but many of us are in a shifting market right now, it's going to start happening more and more, unfortunately. That's why it's so critical that you guys review this video again and read the basic guidelines that I'm going to send out to you guys on Fast Class. Become an artist of pulling comps. This is your job. It's part of your job, just as much as prospecting is. Knowing the value of the homes that you're selling is so critical, you guys. Now, the second question was, do we have to pay for a second appraisal? If
How often?
Oh, how often? Not
Does that happen?
Yeah, good question. So it's not too often, but it definitely does happen, especially in the shifting markets. And when that happens, if it's a rebuttal, your buyer typically is not paying extra fees for a rebuttal. However, if the buyer says like middle fingers up to this complete appraisal, then they want a completely new appraisal. They're going to have to pay for another appraisal. And appraisals right now are usually going in through rush fees. They're usually pretty pricey because appraisers are very difficult to find. Sandy, I see your hands up.
Hey, I just wanted to ask real quick, when you're running comps, how much sort of like weight or consideration do you give to a purchase that was made with cash, like versus a financed one, since those can often potentially come in like lower than, you know, like a cash offer could come in lower than a financed one?
Right. Yeah. Oh man, excellent question. Love this. So I typically, and from my understanding of pulling comparables with an appraiser, they're typically not concerned with that. Great question though, for sure. Yeah. You may, you know, if you are going to go meet the appraiser, go ahead and jot that down. Offer was all cash. Conventional offer, FHA offer, any information that you can help to justify the value, put that on that MLS sheet. No harm. Here's what is going to harm you though. If you know that your listing, no, let me take that back. If you know that the property that your buyer is writing an offer on has a $50,000 foundation report, I'm not going to go big mouth that to everyone around. If the appraiser asks you, have inspections come in? Yes. Have appraisals come in, inspections come in? Yes. Period. Have the inspections come in with a ton of termite work needing to be done? Yes. How much work? Okay, now you can give further information. Don't be sharing all this info if you don't need to. Okay, guys, keep your cards close to your chest. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm not telling you to be deceitful by any means, but there's no need for you to give all this extra fluff if it's not necessary to share. Subject to running comps for a buyer. Okay. So if I'm running comps for a buyer and the if the offers are coming in at it's only cash offers, you know, even then, Sandy, I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight on it. I would definitely let them know. And just like you explained it here with your question, let them know, hey, sometimes cash offers do come in a little bit less, so we may need to bump this up to the max. Yeah, so definitely make note of it and just let the buyers know, just like you explained it to us here. Great question. And Antonio, yes, share only what is needed. I'm not telling you to not disclose, right? I'm just saying share only what is needed. Mohsin, your hands back up. Did that answer your question? Do you have another one?
I had one more.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Is it advantageous ever to do a BPO and submit it if you feel like there's a lot missed? Is it advantageous to produce one? I know it takes much time of our day to do one, but I'm just wondering if the value doesn't come there or something's up with the value, whether it's too low or too high. Is it advantageous to produce a BPO on top of having a CMA or whatnot?
So explain to us what a BPO is.
Broker price opinion, usually it's done when there's foreclosures. They'll send realtors out to a home to take pictures, and they're very like a guy, like, what do they do it in CSI, where they examine the house?
They're
right?
investigators.
Forensic, yeah, they're like, you're doing like forensic investigation of the house and the actual quality, but it's so tiered that one would think that a BPO would trump an appraiser, but in actuality, from a bank's perspective, it's the other way around. But I was just wondering if it's advantageous to produce one, and would it help in any way in these cases?
Yeah, great question. So typically if a BPO is conducted, that's going to trump the appraisal. Yeah. So bringing that in, I mean, yeah, because then it trumps the appraisal for sure. Typically with foreclosures, the sellers aren't going to do appraisals before, because they're usually pretty tight on cash already, right?
Right. So it does trump their appraisal.
I am fairly certain that it does.
Oh, okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome, you guys. Let's see. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up and I give you my last tip of the day? And feel free to unmute yourselves at this point. Okay, cool.
Was the BPO, he said broker's price opinion?
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
Yeah. Broker's price opinion. I've also heard it called broker opinion of value, BOV.
BOV, yeah.
Yeah. Different areas use different terms. Yeah. And that's why it's, again, important to say comparable market analysis to your client, right? Use the long term, the long language a lot before you start using shorthand with your clients. Yeah. Okay, you guys. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Vanessa. I see your hands up.
I guess for me, which I guess platform is best to run a CMA, because comparison, because I know our HomeSnap has a quick one, and then on my Metro list there's one, and then there's the cloud one. Oh my gosh.
There's so many. My favorite, this is going to trip you up even more. So, and I'm glad you asked, because we're going to do deep dives in the coming weeks over each one of those tools. Every single one of those tools, you guys will have another video that you can tune into or that you can watch later. In my opinion, you guys, if I were you, I would tune in live so that you can ask questions like this, right? And if you're watching this video, you can go ahead and keep asking questions, send them to me on Slack. The one I use is the RPR tool. It's the National Association of Realtors Realtor Property Resource. Let me give you the shorthand of it. RPR. Yep, RPR. There's already a video in Fast Class about it. And then I also like to use the cold hard facts of the MLS. The tough thing with the MLS is that all the agents don't put in, if it's an off-market property, not everyone's putting in their off-market properties. With RPR, I can search properties. I can do comps in Indiana. I can do comps in Virginia. It's a National Association of Realtors tool, so we have access across the nation. Yeah, great question, Vanessa. Alrighty, you guys, my last tip of the day, and this is critical, and you're going to hear me on every single one of these sessions say this: get this shit in writing. Always get it in writing. Here's what I mean by that. One of our friends recently had a seller that got pissed because, you know, oh, you told me the comps said this, and I thought the market was going to go here, da, 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 da. Unfortunately, that agent hadn't saved the comps and never emailed them to the seller. So she had no idea what the comps were that she had pulled, right? So my last tip to you is once you complete your CMA, send your client that CMA in an email. Hey, Vanessa, per our conversation, here is the comparable market analysis that I prepared for 123 Main Street. My comps start on page number 9. Please let me know if you have any questions. This way, they have a copy of it. You have a copy of it where you're not telling them write an offer at 700,000, right? Because we're not giving people this exact number to write. And then lastly, you're going to have a copy of it to go back to and refer to. And this is great for when you're pulling your comps for the appraisal, because some things may have sold in the time that you went to look at the property to the time that the appraiser is coming in to do their opinion of value. The appraisal is one person's opinion of value. If that one person's having a bad day, that appraisal may come up short. If they're having a great day, that appraisal may be $1 million over asking, right? Remind your clients it's one person's opinion of value. So we may need to do a rebuttal. If that happens, I want you to know that I'm going to continue to look at the market and see what sells between now and the time that the appraisal is complete. All right, Moshe, you have one more question.
I'm so sorry. I got
No, don't apologize. It's great.
Okay. So if you're using the MLS to do a CMA, does the tax records help in any way, or even the confidentiality messages within?
Yeah. So
do those help in any way, or are they?
Yeah, that's a good question. So appraisers have access to the MLS. They have access to keys. Most of them have access to super keys, the MLS. So they're going to look that up on their own. And I'm so glad you asked this, because what is on the tax record is what the appraiser is going to go off of. It doesn't matter that the listing agent said this is a 5-bedroom home. The property tax records say it's a 3-bedroom home. The appraiser is going to go off of the 3 bedrooms, not the 5, because this is what is legally the property, not this.
So good question. Really quick before we go, what happens if you're dealing with the house and at some point they added additional levels or even rooms and didn't get a
permitted
permit for it?
Yeah.
What happens in those moments?
Yeah, so then what I do is I bring in a 3-bedroom comp, and let's say they built out the den to be a 4th bedroom. I bring in 3-bedroom comps and 4-bedroom comps, and I'll do 3 of each. That way I've got my ass covered on both ends.
But how do they make that actual record? So next time around, does it need to be part of the tax records, or?
Great question. Not necessarily. Some sellers or buyers, it doesn't matter if it's public record, what it states on public record. Some it does. What your clients can do is they can go down to the building department of that city and they'll find that out on their own. It's outside of the scope of our duty to find out information about permitting and building code. So my advice to that buyer is, if this is a concern to you and you would like to make it come up to code, you'll want to go to the city's building department.
So they could get penalized for it as well for not getting a permit up front.
It depends, it depends on the city. There's so many variables. That's why it's so important for us to look at tax records when we're writing offers. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Awesome, you guys. Well, I appreciate your time so much today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being at the first initial one of these ever. I can't wait to see you guys next week. We're going to be covering disclosures. That's what we're going to be covering. All right, my friends, I'll see you next week. Y'all take care.